Hi friends of cocktails! Welcome to a special segment of Cocktail Time called Cocktail Engineering. Here we look at everything we need to make a perfect cocktail, from spirits, syrups and ice, to gear, glassware and techniques I use. I have a degree in civil engineering, which explains why I want to be so precise in making cocktails. And that's what you can expect from cocktail engineering as well. So let's start with something sweet, shall we? Today we'll talk about sugar and natural syrups, and we'll make simple and rich syrups. And we'll talk about honey, agave and maple syrups. Sweeteners are one of the key building blocks of a well-balanced cocktail. The first definition of a cocktail listed sugar as one of the ingredients, and vast majority of recipes call for something sweet to balance sour or bitter parts, or just to soften the rough edges of the booze. Speaking of cocktails, give me a second to make myself an old-fashioned, since I need a drink to tell you all about syrups. We made a rum old-fashioned before, so I'll make a whiskey old-fashioned. Today I'll sweeten it with maple syrup. The advantage of a syrup as opposed to a sugar cube is that the granulated sugar doesn't dissolve quickly enough, so your first and last sips are drastically different. Now, to make syrups, we need sugar. Sugar is a generic term for sweet-tasting soluble carbohydrates. The most common sugar, also known as white sugar, granulated sugar, table sugar, or just regular sugar, refers to sucrose, a disaccharide composed of glucose and fructose, and it has a purity higher than 99.7%. Everybody following along? Good. Sugar is naturally made by and found in all green plants. All sugar is made by first extracting sugar juice from sugar beet or sugar cane plants, and from there, many types of sugar can be produced. Through slight adjustments in the process of cleaning, crystallizing and drying the sugar, and varying the level of molasses, different sugar varieties are possible. We won't focus on the crystal size, but the color. This depends on the amount of molasses remaining or added to the crystals. It also gives your syrup a more complex flavor, but for that classic 1-to-1 simple syrup, I use white sugar for a more neutral taste. I'd recommend always measuring sugar and water by weight, since water and sugar don't have the same density. So to get a true 50% sugar syrup, I'll measure out 150 grams of sugar. Then cover that with the same weight of boiling hot water. This will help the sugar dissolve and also keep the syrup for longer than if you mix it with cold water. If you're in a hurry and want to use it right away, you can mix it in a blender without heating the water. Boiling both the water and sugar on a stove might throw out the ratio of 1-to-1. Some refined cane sugars may be refined using bone char, made from charred animal bones. If you want your cane sugar to be vegan, look for the labels vegan, organic, unrefined, natural or raw. Meanwhile, beet sugar is always vegan due to a different refining process. Always store it in a clean container and in the fridge, and simple syrup made like this should keep for up to a month. If it gets moldy, it's time to get rid of it. Simple syrup should be your default sweetener, as it lets other ingredients to shine, and it's more forgiving with measuring. But if you're looking for a little bit more funk from your sugar, use demerara or even add some muscovado. I used 2-part demerara to 1-part water to make this rich, simple syrup. We're again measuring by weight, but this time we'll add sugar and water to a blender, which will just incorporate it faster. And like we said, precise measurements. That usually means some corrections too. We're adding 200 grams of sugar and 100 grams of water. This will give us 66% sugar by weight. That also means you need to adjust the ratios of syrup added to the cocktails. Use 2/3 of the amount of 1-to-1 simple syrup you would add. And since rich syrup can sometimes stick to the walls of the jigger, make sure to wash it out with the next ingredient. I like to measure and add rich simple syrup with a bar spoon. which I then use to stir the cocktail as well, which ensures that all of the intended sugar made it into the drink. Because of the higher sugar content, Rrich syrup should last in the fridge for several months. Syrups made from dark sugars pair really well with darker spirits like rum or bourbon, which benefit from sweet molasses undertone. I used it in the rum old-fashioned episode. But how to use other sweeteners like agave, honey or maple syrup in a cocktail? When done right, it's fantastic. Maple syrup has around 67% sugar by weight, which is comparable to Rrich simple syrup, so don't try to dilute it with water, since this will affect its shelf life. I mean, fridge life. You keep it in the fridge, right? The old grades of maple syrup, A, B and C, didn't signify the quality, but were based on color and taste. Now most are graded with an A, with additional, more descriptive names. This pairs really well with something that can handle additional maple taste, with hints of vanilla and caramel. And whiskey, of course, comes to mind. Canadian whiskey and maple syrup. Perfect match, eh? Another sweetener we know pairs well with whiskey is honey. We know this because we already used it for the Gold Rush episode. But with around 82% sugar, it's super thick, so you need to make it into a honey syrup to help it incorporate. To bring the sugar content of the syrup to 50%, we added 64 grams of water. When making honey syrup for your cocktails, you have to realize that the taste can vary significantly based on the type of honey. We used linden honey for the Gold Rush. The small amount of protein in the honey will also add some foaminess to your cocktail. Honey syrup also shines paired with gin. And the business cocktail is the really cat's pajamas. It's been 100 years. Can we please bring back these phrases? And the last syrup for today, agave. You'll often hear agave nectar, which is just a marketing term. Agave syrup is produced from several types of agave, including agave tequiliana or blue Weber agave, the same that's used for making tequila. What you need to know is that it has around 75% sugar by weight, of which most of it is fructose. While this means it won't spike your blood sugar as much, it also has a hit and run effect on the palate. Another thing to note about fructose in agave syrup is when chilled, it causes it to taste sweeter than other syrups. Typically, colder the drink, the less sweet it tastes. Not with agave syrup. To compensate, you have to add a little less in percentage of sugar by weight. If you're using it as is, add about 50% of what you use for simple syrup by volume. But since it will be hard to get it out of the jigger, you might want to add 64 grams of water to 100 grams of agave syrup, just like we did with honey. Since agave has less sugar than honey, but keeps its sweetness when chilled, it will turn out great. Agave works great in a Tommy's margarita, replacing orange liqueur as a sweetener. And we cannot talk about these syrups without mentioning what the king of cocktails came up with. Dale DeGraw found that the combination of 1 part simple syrup, half a part agave syrup, and quarter part honey syrup gives the right amount of sweetness, complexity, and a light, mild flavor. He perfected his ratios just after releasing his influential 2002 book, The Art of the Cocktail. But the recipe is now added to the revised 2020 release of The New Craft of the Cocktail. Links to this and many other fantastic cocktail books are added to the description below. But back to the syrups. What sweeteners do you use most often to make cocktails? And which one of these have you tried before? Let me know in the comments. Next time on Cocktail Engineering, we'll make some additional sweeteners that require a bit more work and time. Until then, oh, honey. Keep learning and keep making cocktails. Cheers! This is the end of the video. If you want to see more cocktail recipes and more bloopers, check this out. And think about subscribing. Thanks for watching.